Good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome to Rushcliffe Borough Council's Governance Scrutiny Group meeting. I'd like to remind everyone that the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, and a recording of the meeting will be available afterwards on the Council's YouTube channel. In addition, under the Local Authorities Executive Arrangements, Meetings and Access to Information England Regulations 2012, other people may film, record, tweet or blog from this meeting, and the use of any such images or sound recordings is not under the Council's control. May I remind councillors to please switch your microphones off when you are not speaking. Thank you. And obviously I'd like to welcome our external guests who will be presenting a couple of items today, and our officers who, as ever, are giving up their time in the evenings to come and help us scrutinise and conduct our business. So I'd now like to move to the first item of the agenda. Apologies for absence, please.
We have apologies from Councillor Gordon Wheeler and Councillor Breck is substituting.
Okay, we also seem to have been one member short who haven't received apologies from, and one assumes that something may have gone wrong, and Councillor Butler is substituting for him. Are there any declarations of interest? No. So third item on the agenda is the minutes of the meeting of the 29th, 2023. Is everyone content that those minutes are a correct record of the meeting? And can I just have a quick show of hands to say that we accept those? Yeah, lovely. Thank you. So we accept those minutes.
Two actions arising out of the previous.
Sorry, yeah. If we want to go through the actions arising, please, Mrs. Whittaker.
Okay, so the first action was detailing a bit further detail on DBS checks within the leisure centres. So I just want to confirm that we do ensure, the leisure centres do have to ensure that all staff have received a clearance on DBS before they're allowed to work. We have a 3-year renewal process so that no one slips through and they're picked through that. Our leisure manager site does annual audits on site, and also just random checks of staff at the leisure centre. So hopefully these things can expect. With regard to the second question, it's specific detail around whether the council will meet its net zero targets. So on this, obviously, the council is still expecting to meet its target for 2030, currently focusing mostly on its two highest areas of travel, transport and fleet. So we do have planned at the moment some decarbonisation of Cockbrake Leisure Centre, which will remove more than 300 tonnes of CO2 per annum. We're also halfway through some heat decarbonisation plans and surveys for the majority of our non-leisure property assets. With regard to the transport and fleet, we've had a Senex review done, so it's a third-party review, which has helped us to create a strategy around replacing and decarbonising our fleet.
Okay, everybody happy with the responses to those action points? Okay, so I'll move on to the agenda items. The first item, so item 4 on the agenda, is the internal audit progress report. So we have BDO here this evening, so I'll hand over to Gurpreet Dulay and Max Armstrong to take us through.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll be presenting our progress report for the last quarter, and included within that is a summary of the 3 reviews we've completed in that quarter. So we've got the final review from 22-23, which is the project management hybrid mail review. And then also from 23-24, we've got main financial systems and markets income. We've also like to draw to the committee's attention the changes to the plan which have been agreed with management over the last quarter. So the plan for 23-24, which included air pollution and fleet management, it's been agreed, and we're requesting the committee's approval to solely focus this on the fleet management. And the reason being is to ensure we've got more time to do a deeper dive into fleet management specifically. But also we have undertaken an environment audit at the council last year, where we gave substantial assurance over the design of controls and moderate assurance for effectiveness. So moving on to the tables, which are on page 21 of your packs. So the 22-23 table shows you the plan is now complete and a summary of the opinions we've given for each of those reviews. And then on page 22, we've got the 23-24 plan, where you'll see there's 2 reviews complete plus the fraud report. And then also you'll see that the work we started for the reviews that are due to come to the committee later on in the year. So moving on to the project management hybrid mail report. So this review really was looking at the implementation of the hybrid mail that was brought into the council in, I think, 2013, but then also the ongoing management of that project and the benefits of it ultimately since then. So we've given a substantial assurance on the design of controls and moderate on the effectiveness for this, with a medium finding and 2 low findings. So that the medium one, which is what I draw to your attention, is around the retention of documentation, mainly relating to the initiation of the project. So quite a few years ago, I understand project management framework, which was in management response, is now being developed and is in draft, which will address some of these points around creating sort of a more clear filing structure for the documentation. So there were also some two low findings, one around evaluations of the trial period for the project, and then also around the tracking of mail to the delivery stage, which I understand there's conversations with the county council to try and work on that going forward. And then moving on to the main financial system review. So this is a cyclical review that we do. This year we focused it on treasury management. So the aim of the review is importantly not around is the council's treasury management strategy effective. It's more looking at the controls in place to then implement that through placing daily deals relating to investments, for example, monitoring treasury risks, and then also the reporting that comes to this committee and to management in line with statutory requirements. So for this review, we've given substantial assurance for both design and controls, which is our highest level of assurance. And that's mainly down to the fact there was only one finding, which was a low, and that related to the retention of evidence of the reconciliations between the counterparty statements monthly and the bank statement. So again, it's a minor point, and actually you'll see in the report there's a lot of good practice that was identified in this review. Importantly, again, around the scheme delegations being complied with on the daily deals process. And then finally onto the markets report, which looked at income collection around markets, focusing mainly on the Bingham market, which is managed by rural retailers for the council. So this review really looked at the process for charging traders, collecting income, and then banking that. So within this, we sort of did testing around the physical observation of security arrangements for the cash collection, and then obviously taking it through to the banking, but also for other income from the markets. So where the council invoice monthly or quarterly based on lease arrangements to check whether that was invoiced, importantly, in a timely manner, and then collected. So again, we've provided substantial assurance over the design and effectiveness of controls in this review, with only one low finding, which related to a very, very minor low discrepancies between the cash collection spreadsheet, which is developed at the time of collecting the cash, and the bank statement. And so I think these were £7 and £9. And the root cause behind that was that when traders provide cash as it's collected, this wasn't an envelope, so it couldn't then be traced back to the individual where those discrepancies arose. Again, you'll see a lot of good practice in this report, which is included within that executive summary. So that concludes the 3 reviews we've done. We've also got our sector update just at the end of our progress report. And I just want to draw to your attention, as we're in a leisure centre as we speak, around one of the articles around the government launched its new sports strategy, looking at getting 3.5 million additional adults and children physically active in the next sort of 10 to 15 years, or 10 years actually. Thank you.
As Councillor Sims pointed out at the last meeting, we are here to scrutinise. So has anyone got any questions on those reports? Councillor Thomas.
It's just a question, really. Oh, 2 questions. The first one was about the not looking at air pollution in the context of fleet management. I don't really understand why it's acceptable not to, if we're reviewing the fleet management, not to look at the air quality issues arising from that review. So that was the first question, yeah.
So the original title of the review was air pollution and fleet management. So the conversations with management was around, can we focus more on fleet management, around some of the controls around, is it meeting statutory obligations in terms of certain checks, testing on vehicles. It does also include stuff around the vehicle replacement scheme and program there, which naturally ties into the carbon management action plan that the council have in place. So it includes areas, for example, is around the procurement process for new vehicles. Does that procurement include, say, electric vehicles or environmentally friendly vehicles? So it is incorporated within that, but that's the for the committee's approval ultimately.
Does that give you?
Not really. I don't know if I've got a question on another subject, but I don't know if anybody else wants to ask about that.
Yeah.
Can you just clarify by what you mean by air pollution? Because obviously there's air pollution about the fleet, but there's also other aspects of air pollution. So when you say missing out air pollution, can you just expand on that?
Yes, I believe in our initial plan, which was brought to the committee earlier in the year, the air pollution was around air quality. So the statutory reporting on air quality, the council, and I think it's with the wider county as well, on the air quality strategy. So that's the bit that around air pollution where the original scope was looking, including around the fleet management, which is why they were originally put together, because they naturally, there's clear overlaps, I guess, there. Sorry, you're gonna. So I guess where our review will look is focusing again on some of the controls around fleet, but it won't ignore the air quality side in terms of the actual vehicles replacement scheme and what the council's vehicles are doing to contribute to that. Yes.
Just to add as well to Max's point earlier about the air pollution already being audited within the environment audit, it did receive a report substantial on that, so there's a high level of assurance already on that subject.
Councillor Thomas.
I think it's really just making sure that when we review the fleet and we replace the fleet, then air pollution from that fleet is being fully considered. My concern is that that's been taken out. But if that's not the case, then that's fine.
Okay, my understanding is that it's not been taken out because it's the things that are being measured are taking that into consideration if you're renewing the fleet.
So effectively, yes, you're right. It sort of widens the scope of the fleet audit to be able to pick up those things as well.
Does that give you a satisfactory answer? Any other questions? Councillor Sims.
Yeah, mine's moving on to the cash handling of the market. Is it unusual these days or is it gaining in unusualness for these days for cash to be handed around as councils? Because it really doesn't give a terribly good traceability with cash, and certainly with electronic systems that are instant now. Wouldn't it be good diligence for a council to not get into the murky, seedy world of cash?
So yeah, no, absolutely, you're right. In terms, I think the general trend is less and less cash amongst councils. In fact, we've seen some councils move to completely cashless in terms of their arrangements. So I think if you looked on Google, you could probably find a few examples very, very quickly. I suppose some areas and markets is probably an obvious one, lends itself more naturally to cash as part of the payment there. Having said that, the amounts are relatively low in the grand scheme of things. And you're probably right in terms of the trend more widely in the sector is moving towards a cashless society, and councils are very much part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would there be it seems to me that there's lots of costs involved, such a small amount of money that's collected, and would it be wise for the council to consider moving to cashless as an auditor? Would you advise that?
So we can't advise that from our position. That's an appetite and a consideration for the council and management and members as to whether you wanted to make that determination or not. Obviously, some councils go on the side of actually we need to continue cash arrangements because that supports certain individuals and users, and others say actually no, we need to move further, and that's a consideration for yourselves. From our point of view, we're going to assess the controls that you have in place and say, are they working? Obviously, if we reviewed this and we said, actually, there are huge discrepancies, which is what we haven't found, then we may be saying, well, actually, in order to mitigate that, you might want to look at other means. The reality is we found basically no discrepancies apart from very trivial ones. Therefore, it's really an appetite discussion and decision for the council. And all we can say is that there are some authorities, couldn't give you a statistic on it, but there are some authorities who have gone cashless in all areas. And the values that we're talking about here that the council have in cash are very low. I think the insurance limit, as we note there, is 15,000 or something. So, these are low level values. How efficient it would be to remove that, have it all electronic, I can't give you the precise answer. We don't have a particular view. We're happy the controls are operating from the ones that we have seen.
So it's not so much about cashless. That's the decision for the council, not. Yeah. I'm always slightly reluctant to see a completely cashless society because there's, you and I might be comfortable with it, but there's plenty of people who are not. Councillor Perrick and then Councillor Om.
Is it possible to have both cash as well as a cashless, using your card?
Yes, again, in all parts of the country, it takes something like car parking. Even in my local area, I live in Leamington Spa. So, in my local area, you can pay by cash, you can pay by card, and I'm sure you can set up arrangements with suppliers where people can make both. I'm not entirely sure exactly here whether you can pay by either. Sarah may know. But ultimately, yes, in theory, you could have both operating as we do in obviously many other parts of society.
I think, so just to come back on, I guess, both your points. I think at the moment it's the sort of market manager that collects that cash. So in terms of it being cheaper it's not like we're paying for somebody to go out and collect the cash from market store holders. That person would still be there to inspect, make sure that the stores are up and safe, see if the market holders need any assistance or anything like that. So that position would still be there. I guess, like you say, we could look at cashless, and there are occasions like car parking, like you said, where you can pay by card or pay by cash. Like Councillor Edavines just said, do we want to take away that option altogether? We haven't in every other area. We like to still offer that option, although we are more and more going to a cashless customer base. But it can be looked into, but it's whether that would be financially viable in terms of providing that option. We do have other ways to pay by cards in other of our places, point of sale machines, for example. We'd have to look into a mobile one. But I can certainly pass that back as something to look into.
Okay.
My point is that cash costs money to handle. It costs money to bank. There is a carbon aspect of dealing with cash and getting it to the bank. All these things can be eliminated if we went to a more electronic way of collecting money, and it's traceable and accountable. And that is my point. I've not got anything against cash per se, but it's the amount of inconvenience it provides and the amount of money it costs to deal with that cash. And I understand banks even charge money for dealing with cash now. So it's all those savings that I'm thinking of, and the environmental positives of not having cash.
Take your point on that, although card payments aren't free, so we are charged for those as well. So take point.
Can we just, Councillor Gowan would like to speak on this point? Yeah, and then I'll bring you in.
I'm all for saving carbon, but we are here to provide services. With all respect, the best way to reduce the cost of the market would be to get rid of the market. We're not proposing that. So it's not all about saving money. It's about providing services to residents, and if they have to pay by cash, they have to pay by cash.
Councillor Om.
Yeah, just wanted to find out the sampling taken for this audit. I think you mentioned that 15 market days and 13 reviewed. So have you collected the sample just from one market, or from all the markets?
So the sample focused on Bingham markets, and the other markets are managed by external providers. So the market focus, so the focus on that. So what our approach was to essentially, it's done every week on a Thursday. So we picked 15 Thursday markets, we got a spreadsheet which had all the cash collected from each individual on those days, and then we traced that back to the bank account. So yeah, that's how we approached our sample selection for that.
Okay, Councillor Calvert, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I was actually waving when we were talking about the air pollution and the fleet management. So it's a bit historical, this comment. It was just the issue about the routes that the fleet of vehicles use, because clearly you want to try and minimise air pollution where there are air quality hotspots and around schools, and whether that issue of route determination is anything like that is considered.
So from a air pollution perspective, the review's unlikely to cover whether it's around schools mainly. It's more around that replacement programme for other council considering this as part of their vehicle purchasing going forward. So again, the obvious one would be electric vehicles, which you see at quite a few authorities as part of their vehicle replacement scheme. So as opposed to sort of being geographically focused as to where the vehicles are, it is more around what vehicles the council are using to contribute to that wider air pollution within the area.
I think it's probably fair to say that because there are, yeah, obviously we're talking about the fleet, and there are other monitoring of air quality as a separate item, sort of thing, if you like. Yeah. Councillor Thomas, you wanted, have you got a few more questions?
Another question.
Yeah.
I've only got one.
Oh.
This is about the hybrid mail project. There was was identified that documentation hadn't been filed by a particular member of staff, so it was unavailable after the member of staff left. Is that correct? So I was just wondering if this applied to any other projects that member of staff had worked on, or if it applied to any other staff, and had we looked at going back to those projects and making sure they were documented retrospectively.
So I can't necessarily comment on that individual member of staff. We looked at this project. We also did do a project management review, which did look at a few other projects of the council, which I think we presented a few committees ago, where the opinion I think was very much the same. So I think it was substantial on effectiveness, module on design. In terms of the documentation, I don't believe there's been a process of going back and putting the documentation in place for this project, because it was quite a few years ago that this initiation was done. I think what the process going forward is to create sort of a clear filing structure to ensure that it can be traced in the future for other projects. And I think the wider project management framework will fit as part of that, and it will be a requirement of that.
So as the auditors, are you happy now that going forwards, having identified that as a past problem, that there have been things put in place to make sure something like that doesn't happen again? Because that's basically
My question wasn't really about how we stopped it happening in the future. It's about how do we have to go back and look at any project to make sure that missing documentation is retrofitted.
Yeah.
So it may be an exercise that the council would like to do. I think it's probably for us to leave to management to decide whether that's a process. As I say, for the other project management review, we provided a moderate and substantial opinion on design effectiveness. So hopefully that gives you some assurance around wider project management within the council. I think it would be a decision for management to say, would we like to go and look retrospectively at other projects, as you say, to see if that is an issue more widely.
Councillor Gowan,
Yeah, hybrid mail. Honestly, if I wasn't a councillor, I'd probably kicked up a mega fuss with the council about hybrid mail. I'd be interested to know, I find it not fit for purpose. I'd like to be interested to know how many of the email attachments are opened. Do you know? And I'd like to also know why they are password protected for most of the emails that the council sent out, given that it's not confidential to know what your council tax is. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I've not got the data on the number of emails that are opened and the password protection question. So our review more focused on how the project is more managed as a whole. I may defer to management here if they've got an answer on that specific question at all.
is there?
I don't know, Gemma. Do you know?
It's certainly something I can ask the question. So this is hybrid mail is something that is managed by the business support unit team. So the ins and outs of how it works on a day-to-day basis, I have to say I'm not familiar with, but I can certainly pick that up with Lynn, and we can have a chat about that if you'd like. Yeah.
Okay. Any further questions on that report? So the recommendation is that obviously we have to consider the report, and which I think we have. We've asked questions, and I think we've got answers. So if that's okay, we'll move on to the next item, which when my machine decides to tell me. So that's the risk management report. Charlotte is presenting us with the risk management report. Max, you're both obviously presented your report. You're welcome to stay, but if you wish to go, I know last time you stayed because you wanted to see how the meeting went. Yeah, no, that's fine. Excellent, thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. So, risk management report, half-year update, but I'm aware that some of the committee members are new. I'm hoping there isn't too much here to get concerned about, which is a nice place to be. Can I direct your attention to page 39 of the report pack, which is the start of the report on risk management. So this is a regular report. It highlights changes in the council's risk register as well as risk management activity in the period since the last report. In terms of that, risks on both registers have been reviewed as part of the council's performance management framework. The council's risk management group met earlier on this month. Service managers, as Matthew said earlier on, have been reviewing risk statements. And as of an hour ago, you had risk management training as well. So at the moment, there are 38 corporate risks and 27 operational risks on the risk register. The number of those risks, it fluctuates each time I come and see you, but that's not to be alarmed. It's just an indication that we are continuously reviewing the risks on the risk register, which is exactly what we should be doing. The risk registers are presented in Appendix A, but I would like to bring your attention to the following. So 2 risks have been removed. One of those was about the local development order, which has been agreed, so is no longer a risk that we might not agree it. And Rushcliffe Oaks, our crematorium, which has now opened, so there is no longer a risk that we're not going to open it. 2 increases in risk rating, one relating to the transformation strategy on the basis of a number of different financial factors, such as Rushcliffe Oaks just opening up and building their things, but also the cost of living crisis continuing and that putting pressure on other income. ICT loss or failure of service. This is related to cybercrime. So I was quite interested to see Matthew flag that one up earlier on because it certainly reflects what we have internally. This report reports on 6 reductions to risk ratings. I'm not going to go into them in detail, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about those. Both the increases and decreases are detailed at paragraph 4.6 on pages 40 and 41. And Mr. Chairman, I'm quite happy to answer any questions.
Okay. And has anyone got any questions, Councillor Ong?
My question is about those risk increased in ICT, risk of the cyber attacks. What are we going to do about it?
Greg Dwyer, our ICT manager, regularly goes training, seminars, and actually puts measures in place to ensure that the council is very well protected against cyber attack. The risk increase isn't necessarily a concern that we have that we might be attacked. It's just an acceptance that there is more of a chance. But what we put in place are all the mitigating factors, which means that we don't believe that we are at a significant risk at this precise moment in time. We have protection in place. Our job is to make sure that continues.
Happy with that. Councillor Sims.
Yeah, do we have a risk appetite for the organisation? Is there a risk appetite where a number is presented and this is intolerable to the organisation? Have we been through that process of actually risk profiling and actually agreeing as an organisation what is acceptable and what's not?
From memory, I believe if you have a read of the risk management strategy, which came here 2 years ago, this is why I'm saying from memory, because 2 years, it gets reviewed next year. I'm fairly certain there's a paragraph in there about risk appetite because I remember writing it. I don't think it does anything in terms of putting a number on it. And that number would just be arbitrary unless you compared it against other organisations. But I think it does outline what our risk appetite is. And if you'd like, I can include that in more detail when I come back in February.
Yes, please. Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Councillor Butler.
Thank you. There's reference to the risk of a lack of qualified, knowledgeable staff, and I know that's probably a bit more historic now. I'm sure I heard some point. Well, that mainly referred from memory to the planning department in particular. How are things now? I mean, do we? Because I'm sure I've heard somewhere that we're pretty much over that now. But so does that? Will that affect? Will that change the score on the door, so to speak, if that makes sense? Thank you. Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine. It did originally refer to planning, yes. So as far as planning is concerned, we now have a fully staffed team. We also have a contract in place with an external supplier so that we can deal with the peaks in planning applications coming through. But essentially, our staff is now up to capacity, working as it should do. Once people get used to their roles and such like, that will become a lot easier. So planning, yes, looking much better than it did. Unfortunately, there are also difficulties recruiting professional staff to other areas across the council that may or may not have been an issue when the risk first went in, when it first applied to planning. So at the moment, particularly environmental health is really struggling in a similar kind of way. So the risk stays in and it stays where it is.
That's why it's still a red risk.
And obviously, there's always going to be areas where you need to look at our staffing levels and providing the services accordingly. I take it.
I think that's just the nature of business.
Yeah. Councillor Thomas.
Yes, I've got a few things, but the first one really was to suggest that we add another opportunity risk, and that would be to do with the affordable housing capital amount that's in the budget, and the opportunity to do something with that to provide affordable housing, social housing. I think if it was listed in the opportunity risks, I think it would get reviewed, and I was just wondering if that could be added.
I think actually there is a report going on the affordable housing in that section 106 fund. I can't remember off the top of my head when it is, but I think there is one going soon that reviews that process anyway.
I think it's going to scrutiny, but I just think it would be useful to list it as an opportunity risk, given that there's money in there that isn't moving.
There's absolutely no reason why we can't take that back to the risk management group.
Okay. Is that a general consensus that Councillor Thomas's request is reasonable? Yeah. Good. Okay. So we will add that. Yeah. So, Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, I had a few questions relating to the table right at the end of the appendix, where there's the list of all the different risks.
Right.
Okay, so Councillor Butler's already raised the first one, so that's sorted out. It was all planning. I just want to know what the hotspots were on that, so that's okay. Then there was one about DO8. It's the loss of income as a result of the refund of planning application fees under the provisions of the government's planning, performance and planning guarantee. I just wanted to get some explanation as to what that meant from somebody.
Could you?
In the very most generalist terms, because I'm not a planning expert, my understanding is that the planning performance framework means that you have to hit certain targets in terms of processing and decision making and such like. These are on big applications. If you don't do that, they can have their money back.
Right, so there's the danger that thing. Okay. Then the next one was an operational one, which was about the increased number of developments leading to a greater opportunity for affordable housing. I again wanted some clarification on what that was. It's operational one, no. And greater opportunity for affordable housing. I just didn't see that as a risk, having an opportunity for having more affordable housing.
Councillor Calvert.
I think we're going to have to come back to you on that one because I don't know what that one means.
Okay, and the final one then is on the opportunities, and it's about the Rushcliffe vote, which I drive past quite regularly, and at the moment it looks like many people use it, might be wrong. But I wonder why it was such a high likelihood.
Sorry, can you put your mic on again? I know it's
okay. So it scores 16. It's clearly something that looks like it's going to be a really great opportunity. I was wondering why that was the case. Was it meeting its targets currently?
I think it's fair to say that it's not been open very long, and that there needs to be a build-up of how we're doing. And without wishing to sound crude, it's also the middle of summer, so we're not at a peak season for a crematorium use at this precise moment in time. So I think just hang on in there. I think it is a good opportunity. I think it will be realised. We just need to give it time.
So, based on the assumption that everybody's going to die sometime, isn't it?
Yeah, it's always. I think it's always difficult when you're looking at targets like that, and I think. Possibly what's happening at the moment is that there was a bit of optimism of the numbers we were going to get. I just anecdotally, I know talking to one of the local funeral directors not long ago, they've got nothing but praise for the facility. We just need them using it, choosing us more often. I think is probably the thing, is it not? Councillor Gowan.
Quick question, really. There's.
Have you?
Oh, sorry.
Has it gone off again? There we go.
There's a risk that's been reduced from 4 to 1. Well, no, sorry, an impact. Unforeseen incidents happening at public events, impacts being reduced from 4 to 1. As this risk is being reviewed, as it should be being considered under general internal health and safety. So, I mean, I suspect that I might be misunderstanding, but presumably the risk, that impact hasn't reduced from 4 to 1. It's just saying it's been counted somewhere else. Is that what it means? Oh, sorry. It's page 41 if you're wondering.
No, that's fine. So 2 things to add on that. One, we now have sufficient, we believe, mitigating actions in place, which means that the impact and the probability that risk can be reduced. So that's point number 1. That's part of our work on managing risk. The piece of work that service managers have been undertaking to review risk statements has also highlighted a number of areas where we've got risks, individual risks like that one in particular, where we go, actually, why isn't that just included under a higher level risk that covers health and safety across the borough? And so that one is actually one that will disappear when I come in February. So that's part of the work that we're doing now. So the reduction is because we are managing the risk.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Thomas.
Thank you. The third one under operational risks is risk to staff health due to their work. And the note on it that's explaining why the risk is reduced focuses on physical risks, really. I was just wondering if the risks to staff mental health is also considered under that risk. Thank you.
It certainly includes both, though it's still reduced.
Okay. Councillor Parrott.
Under corporate risk, number 2, CEDO2, it says insufficient staff capacity, skills, knowledge, and availability. So that's graded as red. And the impact and likelihood is quite high. Just wanted to ask if you could clarify about why is it so high and what's being currently done to mitigate that.
In general terms, it's about the resources that the council has. Rushcliffe's traditionally quite a lean organisation. We've already talked about deficiencies in certain areas where we're struggling to recruit the right numbers of staff. As for why it's particularly high, I think if we don't have the right staff in the right places, it's very difficult to deliver the services that our residents need. As for why it's as high as it is, I can't tell you at the moment, but I can certainly provide more detail next time round.
Okay. Everybody happy that we've asked all the questions? There's a couple of action points. Sorry,
just coming back. Are there any particular areas in terms of staff retention or where service areas where we are finding it really difficult to recruit? And if so, has any mitigation been put in place?
Certainly planning, we have already mentioned, has been a problem in the past. Environmental health is currently an issue. There are pockets elsewhere across the organisation. It's a very difficult job market and an awful lot of competition for good members of staff. We don't have the resources to offer the same kind of packages as the private sector, which causes a problem, but it is under review. We are looking at what we can do to be more competitive in terms of what we do to attract staff through.
Okay. So I think we've asked plenty of questions there. There's 1 or 2 items to come back to the next meeting. And the recommendation is that we've scrutinised the report and consider and make recommendations on risks that have red alert status, which I think we've probably covered, I think. So if everybody's happy, we can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the Constitution. So over to Gemma Dennis, please.
Thank you, Chair. So as members will probably recall, at the last meeting on the 29th of June, we brought a report summarising proposed changes to the Council's constitution, which we do generally on an annual basis. And the group considered and commented on those. As I'm sure you'll all remember, we had several of the proposed changes which generated some lengthy debate, and the group wasn't able to reach consensus on and putting comments forward to be considered by Council. So as a result, some of those changes that were proposed weren't presented to council because we didn't have comments from this group that we felt we could propose, which everyone was in agreement with. So we now have some outstanding changes that we need to deal with. As you'll probably all remember, those were related solely to planning matters. And when we've looked at the work that we've done around changes to the constitution in relation to planning previously, what we've done is set up a working group, which I think last time we had it was the chairman of planning, the vice chair of planning, and a couple of other members. And I think that involved a simple sitting down for a couple of hours to sort of thrash those out, come up with some recommendations, and they were then reported back to this group and subsequently approved by full council. So it's considered that that worked well previously. So the decision here is to take the same approach to these outstanding changes as well. We're proposing that the working group this time round consists of the portfolio holder, the chair and vice chair of the planning committee, and then 2 members of the governance scrutiny group. So tonight, what I'd like you to do, if possible, is to note that decision to create the working group, and then just have a quick chat about which members of this group sit on that working group. And just to give you some criteria around that, looking at the proportionality side of things, we have 3 Conservative members in the planning chair, the portfolio holder and the vice chair already. So we're looking for a Labour councillor and another. So we are in a position to make a decision between Councillor Calvert, Councillor Gowland for one of those positions, and then between Councillor Birch and Councillor I've got your surname,
Thomas.
Councillor Thomas.
Councillor
Councillor
Carris, I did
Carris,
that.
I was going to say.
So obviously here, this is about proportionality. As chair, I'd like to suggest that actually the closer you are to planning committee, the more appropriate it is that you're on that member working group, and obviously the member working group coming back to us with their recommendations. And then those recommendations, after they've been looked at by us, would then go to full council. So you've already indicated that Councillor Calvert would be, and he's on planning committee, would be, if he's willing to be the...
I would be delighted, Chair.
Excellent. Which leaves us between Councillor Birch and Councillor Thomas. And my suggestion as chair would be that if you'll defer, is that Councillor Thomas, as a member of the planning committee, again would be.
I agree.
Good. Well, that's that then. Councillor Thomas.
I might not want to.
You might not want to.
I don't believe that.
We know you do, because you made lots of the suggestions. So is everybody happy with that then? And that's the member, we set up the member working group as outlined just here with those members, and they report back to this committee.
Can I just clarify the process?
Steve.
Clarify the process that we're going to use, because in the report it refers to the old process, which included going to cabinet, and then it also says, and we want to do what we did before. And then, so we're actually going to avoid cabinet. We're going to have a working group. We're going to come back with it. Okay, that's right.
Yes.
Thank you.
So it reports back to scrutiny, and then that gets approved or not approved, as the case may be. Very good, by full council.
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Good. So that's item on the constitution, and the next report is the annual report for going concern. So over to you, Sarah.
So starting on page 57 of your pack is the going concern assessment for 22-23. So at the moment we've got paragraphs 4.3 to 4.7, which identifies our current position for the council. So that's at the end of 22-23 financial year. We had a 570k efficiency saving, which was 3.8% of net spend, with a 19.6 million in reserves, which saw a slight reduction due to collection fund, and 2.6 million in general fund reserves. Of those reserves, we had 46.4 million in what is deemed to be cash or short-term investments. The capital programme at that time was 21 million, and we had 5.4 million of that carried forward into the current year, mostly in relation to Bingham Arena and a crematorium. And net worth at the end of 22-23 was also 106 million. This is also affected by pension movements, which was about 34 million movement, or 40 million movement between the 2 years. So it just sort of identifies there that there's a fluctuation in relation to pensions on that net worth. But it does also include our fixed assets. And overall, it just demonstrates a good position in terms of where we ended at the end of the financial year. To assess a going concern, you also need to look at then your projected position. So this is summarised in paragraphs 4.8 to 4.10. So our medium-term financial strategy covers a 5-year period. And when we set the budget last year, it was a balanced budget with about 14.7 million of spend and a 2% increase in council tax. We did have to set a transformation plan target of just over 600k for the current financial year, which spreads to about 1.5 million over the 5-year period, and summarises the use of our new homes bonus reserve to offset our MRP charge, which is the minimum revenue provision. And overall, our reserves are expected to be used over the medium term. We then go on to the current position at Q1. So we've already reported a pay pressure due to negotiations on national living wage and pay awards of just under 400,000. But we do currently have sufficient reserves to withstand that pressure. But obviously that then impacts on each year going forward, so it's something to take into consideration. There are Appendix A to C, there are some comparative data that you can look through to sort of give an idea of where other organisations have placed us in terms of our relative safety, I guess. So 4.11 to 4.113 is shown in an Appendix A to C. So Oflog is the new government department for local government, and they've done some comparative data in relation to 21-22, and that's in Appendix A. What that aims to do is position us against other similar authorities. There's no right or wrong level of reserves, but this table summarises that we are in a relatively better position than some of our comparators. Cost of debt has been rising lately, so other authorities that do have debt obviously are impacted more than we are. So this shows us as favourable because we have no external debt, which is to be expected. There's a SIPFA resilience index in Appendix B, which has got an early warning system, which aims to sort of pick out those high risk areas and show a trend over time to which might flag up that you're a particular risk. So you would hope that that would be picked up in the direction that you're travelling. The balance sheet analysis at Appendix C is based on 22-23, so it's the more recent of the data. And it does show us that we have a healthy balance sheet, but we can't be complacent because it can quickly change. So when we're setting the MTFS, which we're currently going through at the moment, that is all borne in mind at the time. Again, in assessing the going concern, we look at governance arrangements. So paragraph 4.14 to 4.15 refers to the council's well-established governance structure. And this is presented annually to this group as part of the annual governance statement and is included in the statement of accounts. Our external regulation and control of the environment is referred to 4.16 and 4.17. It's highly legislated and we have to follow strict codes. For example, we have to set a balanced budget each year by law. We have external audit, which is a statutory requirement, and also lots of compliance with different legislation. You'll be no doubt aware that a lot more councils, we talked about it earlier, a lot more councils are issuing section 114 notices, and even those that haven't are reporting that they are struggling to balance their books. Some of this is linked to poor commercial decisions, rising costs and rising demand, but it's unlikely that the government would allow these organisations to fail. They usually intervene to put measures in place. Luckily, we're not in that position at the moment due to good financial management, but again, those risks are still there, so it's not to be complacent about those. In overall conclusion, the Section 151 officer's opinion is that the council does remain a going concern.
Thank you very much. Obviously, there's a lot of figures in the reports. Has anyone got anything they wish to raise? Councillor Sims?
I noticed in the risk management report, it actually identifies increased in revenue due to interest rates going up, which is significant as a positive. What does that amount to? What is it projected at interest rates going up? What we're projecting extra income?
You're stealing the next report. It's in Marie's report next. But just to say, it has gone up, and you'll see the numbers in the next one.
Yeah, so we'll cover that later. Yeah. Any other questions? Councillor Thomas?
It was more an observation really on Appendix A. We look at the 1, 2, 3, 4th and 5th rows across down.
So council tax.
Yeah, the level of Band D council tax and the council tax revenue per dwelling. It's the difference in our relative positions in this group that's been selected, really. Is that, if you see what I mean, we're right on one side for that one, and we're on that side for the other one, really. Is that reflecting the fact that we have more dwellings at a greater banding than Band D? If you see what I mean.
The first one that you referred to, obviously these have come from Oflog, so they pick data that I'd have to go into the detail to see exactly what's in there. But the level of Band D council tax rates, I think, is purely on what we set in our what's called a CTB1. So we do a report once a year that says how much we're setting our council tax at. I think that relates to that, and that is low as we report each year. We're in the lowest quartile in the country and lowest in Nottinghamshire. So I think that's why we are sort of sitting below that median line. But the council tax revenue per dwelling, I believe that includes the major preceptors, so the county police and fire. So I think that's the reason why for that marker, it's further to the right because obviously we're not in control of those in comparison. Those extra major preceptors are impacting on that. I can double check, but I think that's what that is.
But the question was also,
Well, the question
is it
was,
the relative?
was it to do with the fact that we've got more that are in, because it's council tax revenue per dwelling, you know, we've got more in a higher band, basically. So that was the question, really. But you've got given another reason that they're based on different measures, which is interesting. Yeah, thank you.
But I think it's still a valid question about the, if you like, property profile in Rushcliffe, and does that impact on that?
Again, I'll have to check how they've
It'd
done
be
that.
interesting to, I think, if we can have that reported back at some stage. Councillor Birch.
Yes, just to confirm, the fifth row is gross, including county and all the, because I think Rushcliffe is actually in the 95th percentile for overall council tax. So this myth that we're in the lowest, you know, we are technically for Rushcliffe Borough Council, but overall, because it's an affluent borough, we're in the 95th percentile for overall council tax, which is important to note, I think. Because I hear a lot of we're such a low tax council and party. It does graze a little bit when you know the actual full position is that we're in the 95th percentile overall. I just wanted to note that.
I think what I'd say to that is obviously we're here to talk about Rushcliffe and not what the county council set or what the fire and police set. So, you know, we don't have any control over that. And I make your point. And I think when we were doing training on scrutiny, we were basically asked that we don't put our political hats on for scrutiny. We're here to scrutinise the council and not to make political scores.
No, that's fair enough. Sorry, but also it does impact on the how we set the taxation rate for this council when we know what the overall tax rate is for residents, isn't it? So it is applicable and sort of relevant, isn't it? Because the overall picture is important when we're talking about the Rushcliffe element. So that's the point I'm making.
Yeah, and I accept, and I've often made the point myself that, you know, when someone gets a council tax bill, they don't immediately look at the Rushcliffe amount; it's the total amount. And
as you say, the Rushcliffe element of the total tax bill is relatively small. But when we set our council tax, we are just looking at the Rushcliffe element, and that's the bit that we do report on when we say we're in the lowest.
Councillor Garrett.
Sorry, just to be quite clear on that. So this figure, to be quite clear on that, this figure, the graph that Councillor Carris just raised, sorry, as my brain is going. Thomas, thank you, it's been a long day. This is council tax, total council tax per dwelling, not the Rushcliffe element.
That is my understanding, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions on that report? No? Okay, so again, the recommendation is to note the report and note that there is generally a positive outcome, and we can move on to the next report, which is the capital investment strategy. So that's over to Marie Hills, please. Thank you, Marie.
So this report starts with a look at the economic forecast. The economy is looking more positive. Inflation's fallen from 11.1% in October to 6.8% in July, and it's forecast to be around 5% at the end of the year. Interest rates now are expected to be higher for a longer time. Our Treasury advisors believe that interest rates have peaked at 5.25% and forecast the first cut in Q3 2024, with further cuts reducing interest rates to 3.75% in 2025. These are only forecasts and not facts. Rates might increase to 5.5%, in which case forecasts will be updated. Unemployment has increased in recent months from 3.5% to 4.3%, but will probably need to reach 5% before impacting on growth and wages. Paragraphs 4.5 to 4.8 look at investment income, so this is one of interest. The council is budgeted to receive 1.36 million in interest receipts this year, and is broadly expecting to achieve this. The budget assumed interest rates of 4.5%, and most of our short-term investments, particularly the money markets, are exceeding this. The long-term diversity funds have not been as positively affected. Overall, the council achieved an average interest rate of 4.78% in Q1, compared with SONIA, which was 4.37. Now, SONIA is explained in the glossary, but it's a Treasury benchmark which reflects average interest rates that banks pay to borrow sterling overnight. Appendix C shows a full list of investments held at the end of June. Rates vary daily, but we hold a diversified portfolio. The council considers ESG investments, but not for going SLI, which is obviously security, liquidity and yield. In December 22, we did invest 5 million in HSBC Global Liquidity Fund, and that's yielding 4.82%. Appendix A highlights the fluctuation in fair value of the diversified funds. And as you can see from this, there's been a drop in value of 1.3 million since those were purchased. These funds are volatile and affected by political and economic instability, like shares and the property market. They need to be held long-term gains. The council wouldn't look to sell at this time, so we wouldn't ever realise that actual loss. But for prudence, this has been largely mitigated, this financial risk, by appropriations to a pooled funds reserve, which currently stands at 1.234 million. There is a statutory override in place preventing any accounting loss impacting on the revenue accounts. This is due to end 31st of March 2025, so the council will continue to monitor the situation and take advice from our Treasury advisors. Section 5 looks at the capital programme, the expenditure and financing. We are projecting an underspend of around 6 million against the current budget, with savings on Bingham Leisure Hub, the crematorium, and reprofiling of registered housing providers for future years. The council's underlying need to borrow for capital expenditure is called CFR, Capital Financing Requirement. Table 2, paragraph 5.5, shows a forecast reduction in internal borrowing from a closing balance of 13.26 million in 22-23 to 10.9 million in 23-24. Some of the prudential indicators are shown in Appendix B, one of these being the financing cost to net revenue stream. This indicator is shown quite healthy, currently hovering around 0, since debt payments in the form of MRP is roughly the same as interest receipts. The slight movement in the projected figure relates to net cost of service increasing due to paying inflation. The liability benchmark also shown in Appendix B. A credit balance indicates an excess of reserves over borrowing, so it shows that the council has no need to borrow over the medium term. Paragraph 7 looks at commercial investments, and a bit like Sarah mentioned on the Section 114 notices, it's important that councils avoid over-reliance on speculative activity. So the TM strategy sets a target that this should account for no more than 30% of income from services. Sorry about that. Our current position is 15%, so well within that target. Appendix B also shows income from commercial and service investments as a percentage of net revenue streams, and this is projected to be 11.9%. So to conclude, TM continues to be fraught with difficulty, and there's a general election looming over the next 12 to 18 months. The UK economy is recovering, but inflationary pressures remain. And if inflation doesn't come down, interest rates will have to increase. Whilst the latter will have a positive effect on returns, uncertainty in the economy is having a negative effect on capital value of some of the council's investments. Officers will continue to monitor and report any significant issues to the group.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Marie.
Any questions?
Harry? Yeah, Councillor O.
So on this Appendix C, there are some investment which are giving very low rate. For example, Bank of Scotland. Is it like I'm not sure whether they are the fixed investment or is it any possibility to move the asset from there?
So Appendix C is a snapshot in time, and these investments, the interest rates vary daily. The Bank of Scotland, the call account, that's now got less than £1,000 in there. When I checked this morning, there's less than £1,000 sitting in there. We are looking to move some of the Bank of Scotland monies, 32 days ones, and some of the other ones that are showing slightly smaller rates, Handelsbank and Santander. The interest rates we're getting today, at today's value, if you look today, are actually higher. So instead of 2.2, still though, but we're getting 2.75. Instead of 2.78, we're getting 3.08. But we do try to keep balances in some of these accounts quite low. They do fluctuate, but we just sort of try to keep a diversified portfolio.
Okay. And obviously, overall, you're showing a 4.78
yeah, good job.
on all of them. Councillor Birch and then Councillor Calvert. Sorry.
So I was surprised to learn in the last meeting how common it is to lend money or to other councils.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a mechanism where we can check the sort of liquidity of a council? We've mentioned earlier about risk with councils going effectively bankrupt. Is there anything built in that does sort of mitigate against that? Obviously, there's quite a lot of money in their bank accounts.
So we do obviously take into consideration with investments that aren't local authorities. Our Treasury advisors provide us a list of a credit score in effect, and we will only lend to I think it's AAA, minus AAA and above. But with local authorities, there is no such sort of credit scoring system. So we do our own due diligence on those, as well as taking advice from the Treasury advisors on an as and when basis. So if, for example, there might be a reputational risk of something lending to a particular council, we'll do our research into the background, into the news as to whether they've reported any potential 114 notices, that sort of thing. So we do due diligence around it as well as take advice, but there is no such credit rating in the same way that there are for other institutions.
So let's go back on that one.
Yeah.
So in the event, the unlikely event that they did go south, is there any sort of law that or safety net where we'd be refunded the money from central government, for example, or would we just lose it all?
No, not in the same way. Like you say, they are protected, so to speak. So the government do generally tend to step in with local authorities, and our money is safe. It's more a reputational risk with investing with those authorities.
Okay. Answer your question. Councillor Calvert, you
This is about the diversified funds, and paragraph 4.8 says that funds are still volatile with the downward trend experienced by the political turmoil last year continuing. I'm just wondering whether there's a forecast for it to continue on that downward trend, or whether there's likelihood of that changing.
Stephen.
We do have and have had recently a meeting with the fund managers of a couple of those funds, and their professional opinion is that they will go back in the long term. As Marie said, you do hold the investments with a view to it being long term. I think at the moment we've just had volatility and uneasiness with one after the other with COVID, and then potential now changes in political leadership. So I think it's just having a negative effect on it, but overall the message that we're getting is that it will go back up again.
I think just to add to what Sarah just sort of said, I think the fact that it refers to last year in that paragraph, I think if you look at the current year, the difference, the fluctuation in the current year is only being like 67,000. The bulk of the drop in value actually occurred last year. Just for clarification.
Councillor Thomas and then Councillor Gowland.
Thank you. I've got quite a lot of questions and they're quite silly ones. Oh, well, you know.
I hope not.
They're not silly. They might be stupid questions. I don't know. Really. So when we internally borrow, do we charge ourselves interest?
We do recognise a loss of opportunity of investing that income, but we don't charge ourselves interest as such.
Understood that. In paragraph 5.1, it says something about reprofiling the provision of support for registered housing providers. I didn't know what that meant.
That's just a scheme in the capital programme that's basically, it would have had a lump sum for the current year, but it's been slipped into further years. So part of money still stands there for it. It's just not going to be spent in the current year. Yeah, just profile.
Does that answer it?
I think so.
Yeah, good.
Okay, so so we've lost £1.3 million on investments. Is that right? And but we've gained money on interest. Is that right?
In theory that is right, but I think the thing to remember is we haven't lost anything. You only ever lose on these diversified funds if you were to sell them, and we wouldn't ever do that. Because we've not in that position. And it is quite interesting, like the Section 114 notices that Sarah was sort of mentioning. It's like I did go on to a conference last week, and it was sort of saying, I've just mentioned we've got a reserve, but not that we would need it, but we have got that reserve to mitigate that risk. Some authorities have actually spent their reserves because they're that strapped for cash. But no, we wouldn't ever cash them in, Nicholas.
Okay, so we haven't lost anything because we've not cashed them in. But,
it shows as a paper loss.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I understand. The other question was, we've loaned East Midlands combined authorities £5 million. Did we get it back, really? That was the question.
It's in the table of current investments.
See that?
Oh, there.
Yeah.
You got it.
It was fixed 30 days from July, so yeah. Yes. Just to go back to your point about interest as well, I think the report refers to the budget that we've got this year and that we're meeting it. But just as a point of comparison, last year I think the budget was about 600,000.
Yes,
so it's like our budget has doubled for investment income receipts on the back of the rises in interest rates at the moment. Obviously that will go back down as interest rates go down, but at the moment, yeah, we are about double.
So what you're saying is it's all in the budget?
Yes.
Yeah.
At the moment it is, yeah.
Okay.
Is that your?
Well,
have you got any other?
A bit of a follow-up question about that. So, East Midlands Combined Authority, I was unaware it actually existed at this point, because I'm wrong. Who's responsible for that money when it's with them?
I can't answer that in terms of.
I mean, what is the East Midlands Combined Authority at this point?
I'm sure the team did their research with our Treasury advisors, but they will be a government body who we can lend to. But I don't know the details of that. I can come back.
Yeah, please, thank you.
So basically what we need to know is what is the East Midlands Combined Authority?
Yeah, that's fine.
In fact, actually, is it the seed funding? Seed funding for
I will do some research, yeah.
Proposed mayoral. Okay. Councillor did you hovering or no more questions? So I think everything, obviously thank you both for your both the presentations and the fact that you had most of the answers. It's always heartening to know that our finance team are on top of their briefs. So, any other? If there's no further questions, we can move to the final item on the agenda, which is the work programme. Yeah.
Okay, so the work programme is displayed on page 77. The next meeting that we have is the 23rd of November, and as expected, the statement of accounts has slipped from what would have been this meeting to that one. But overall, they look they look quite heavily populated, but they are standard items, so we should get through them in the same way that we normally do without too much trouble. I don't think there's anything at this stage to be proposed to move. Potentially, again, it's the statement of accounts that we're waiting on external audit. You would have had your letter sent around to you, I think it was earlier this week, from audit, just stating that they aren't yet ready to complete. So there will be a delay on it. We just don't know how long at this stage. Other than that,
And they had sort of forewarned us anyway.
And they had forewarned us anyway, yeah.
Councillor Calvert.
We discussed the governance arrangements, didn't we, earlier in item 6, in terms of looking at the planning side of things in the constitution. Would the intention be to go to the next meeting of this scrutiny group or the February one?
That's a very good point.
Yeah, it's a good question.
So we need to add basically into the work programme the reporting back of the member working group.
Yeah, I suspect November might be a little early, but I'll speak to Gemma after.
Yeah. Okay. So if there's no further questions on the work programme, everyone happy? So thank you all for attending. Thank you to our officers and presenters, and I think that's the end of tonight's meeting. So